In Akron, Ohio, 24-year-old Joy and her 5-year-old son Jack inhabit a grim reality within the confines of a squalid shed they call room. Their living conditions are dire, with just the bare essentials: a bed, toilet, bathtub, television, and a basic kitchen setup. The only source of natural light is a solitary skylight. Tragically, Joy and Jack are not free to leave. They're held captive by a man known as Old Nick, who is Jack's biological father and the one who abducted Joy 7 years prior and routinely rapes her while Jack sleeps in the closet. Jack is the product of one rape. Despite her harrowing circumstances, Joy strives to maintain a sense of hope for her son. However, she battles silently with malnutrition and depression. To protect Jack from the harsh truth of their situation, Joy allows him to believe that room and its limited contents are the extent of their world. In his mind, everything beyond their cramped quarters exists solely within the confines of the television screen. Join us as we delve deeper into this touching and heartbreaking tale. The story begins with the young Jack recalling how he ended up with his mother through Tales from Outer Space on TV and A Journey from the Heavens. As he wakes up, he greets the various objects in their small, rundown room: a chair, a cupboard, and an ink blot on the carpet. Today is a special day for Jack. It's his 5th birthday, and he's bubbling with excitement.
Nice.
Joy informs him they'll be making a birthday cake, adding to Jack's excitement. Then, they continue with their usual routine as she guides him through yoga practice in their small bathroom. She encourages him to exercise by instructing him to touch one wall, then correcting herself and pointing to another. At night, Joy bakes a cake, but due to their limited resources, it turns out to be very small and unimpressive. Jack notices the absence of candles with fire and questions Joy about it. She explains they can't get them, which disappoints Jack. He refuses to eat the cake, expressing his frustration by suggesting Joy could have asked for candles from Old Nick instead of receiving jeans for their Sunday treat last time. Joy reassures him that she gets things they need for their Sunday treat. Jack insists that maybe he'll ask for candles when he turns 6 next week. But Joy corrects him, saying he turns 6 next year. As it grows late, Jack retreats into the tiny cupboard where he sleeps. Old Nick enters and asks about the cake, expressing regret that he would have brought a present if he had known it was Jack's birthday. The next morning, Jack finds his mom still in bed. They continue with their usual routine. Joy cuts apple slices, and her bad tooth falls out, which she gives to Jack, who holds it in his mouth. Jack watches TV on a CRT television and discusses the TV people, who he believes are some form of aliens. Then, Joy teaches him various subjects.
Stop it. Get some help.
Afterwards, Jack takes a bath. He complains to his mom that she didn't inform Old Nick about his birthday, believing Nick would have brought a present. Joy dismisses his claim, stating that Nick was lying. For dinner, Joy serves only a piece of toast. When Jack asks for something else to eat, Joy doesn't respond, visibly frustrated by their limited resources. The following morning, Jack wakes up to find a brand new remote control race car waiting for him. Delighted, he plays with it all around the tiny room, much to Joy's annoyance. As the race car's whirring fills the air, Joy begins screaming up at the ceiling, which is lined with soundproof material. In the absence of windows, only a skylight reveals the blue sky above. Jack excitedly tells his mom about his pet doll, Lucky, and how he can't wait to be reunited with him. However, his mom informs him that Lucky exists only in his imagination and that they don't have a dog. Jack notices a mouse in the kitchen and tries to befriend it, but Joy scares it away. Upset, Jack questions why Joy did that, and she explains that the mouse could eat their food or bite them while they sleep. Jack insists she didn't have to kill it, but Joy reassures him that she didn't, saying it went to the backyard with its family. Confused, Jack doesn't understand what she means. Later that night, Joy is making cheese sandwiches when Jack notices a strange smell. Joy realizes she left the toaster oven on, and it has caught fire. Worried, she sends Jack to bed. As Jack drifts off to sleep, he wonders where he goes when he dreams. Joy reassures him that he's always in that room. Old Nick enters with groceries and notices the smell. Joy explains that she burned the sandwiches she was making because she wasn't thinking. Old Nick criticizes her, saying that thinking was never one of her strong points. When Joy asks about something missing from the bags, Old Nick becomes violently angry with her, complaining about the difficulty of providing for both of them. He reveals that he was laid off 6 months ago and accuses Joy of not understanding how hard it is to buy things without an income. When she asks if he's been looking for a job, he responds angrily. In the cupboard, Jack stirs, observing the argument. Old Nick notices and questions if Jack is truly asleep in there. He attempts to lure Jack out by offering candy, but before Jack can take the bait, Joy redirects Nick's attention to the bed. Later that night, Jack stealthily emerges from his cupboard and tiptoes over to Joy's bed. Old Nick is still asleep next to her. Jack cautiously peers over at Nick, who suddenly opens his eyes and lunges for Jack. Joy awakens and throws herself on top of Nick, but he strikes her, allowing Jack to escape. Nick leaves angrily, and Jack begins to sob. He tells his mom that he knows he's not supposed to leave the cupboard and promises never to do it again. The next morning, Jack wakes up in Joy's bed and notices he can see his breath. When Joy wakes up, he points this out to her, proclaiming himself as a dragon. Joy realizes that Nick has cut the power, leaving them in darkness and without heating, causing them to freeze. They huddle together in blankets to keep warm. Joy then sits Jack down and asks if he wants to know where the mouse went after leaving the room. She attempts to explain that the mouse is outside, on the other side of the wall. Jack questions if she means outer space with the TV people, but Joy clarifies that wasn't true. When he was younger, she made up stories for him to understand, but now that he's 5, she believes he should know the truth. Joy then tries again, explaining that there are 2 sides to everything. Jack, however, responds by mentioning that an octagon has 8 sides. Joy clarifies, explaining that each wall has another side, beyond which lies a world with buildings, people, trees, and a house with a hammock where she once lived. She recounts a distressing memory from when she was 17, deceived by a man who claimed to have a sick dog. Jack interrupts, curious about the dog, but Joy vehemently denies its existence, screaming out her frustration. She struggles to convey the existence of a world beyond the room where they've been confined, a concept foreign to Jack, who has never experienced anything beyond those walls. Joy endeavors to clarify that the people they see on television are real, but Jack is still puzzled. He inquires about the reality of Dora the Explorer, to which Joy responds that she is a cartoon. However, she reassures him that real people do exist, and they are all outside. He accuses her of lying, and she admits that the things she said before were lies, but now she's trying to tell the truth. Jack expresses a wish to be 4 again and suggests she wait until he's 6 instead of 5 to tell him these things. Eventually, the power is restored. A leaf falls on the skylight, and Joy points it out to Jack. He is skeptical because leaves on TV are green, but she explains that leaves turn brown when they fall off the trees and rot. Joy then reveals her plan to get Jack out. She boils water on the stove and explains that she's going to convince old Nick that Jack is sick. This will prompt Nick to take him to a place called the hospital where there are people around. Jack will be instructed to give a note to anyone he sees in the hospital, telling them his mommy's name. Jack feels nervous because he's never seen a real person before and isn't sure what to expect. He questions why they don't just hurt old Nick and escape. Joy recounts a failed attempt years ago when she tried to attack old Nick with the toilet lid, resulting in him catching her and injuring her wrist.
Please, no! No!
Which has troubled her ever since. As it's nearing the time for old Nick to arrive, Joy pours hot water on his face, causing him to scream. She reassures Jack, instructing him to pretend to be sick and act floppy. Then she forces herself to vomit and spreads it around Jack's pillow, which deeply unsettles him. When old Nick enters, Joy pretends to be hysterical, explaining that Jack became sick when the power was turned off and they were left in the cold. Old Nick notices Jack's fever and promises to get antibiotics the next day. However, Joy insists that it's urgent for Jack to go to an emergency room. Old Nick refuses. The following day, Joy devises a new plan. Jack will pretend to be dead instead of floppy, acting stiff like a robot. She will roll him up in a rug, and old Nick will place Jack in the back of a truck. When Jack feels movement, he will unroll himself from the rug during a long stop and run to the first person he sees for help. Joy wraps Jack in the rug, but it's too tight for him to unravel himself. She tries again, this time wrapping him more loosely, and Jack manages to free himself from the rug. Later, as Jack watches TV, he begins to realize that the people he sees are real, while the cartoons are not. This newfound understanding marks a breakthrough for him. Joy reinforces the plan to him, emphasizing that he must unravel, jump out when the truck stops, and seek help. She encourages him to imagine her voice guiding him, even though they'll be apart. When Jack asks if she'll join him in the outside world, Joy agrees, but her lack of conviction suggests she doubts her own survival once old Nick realizes she's tricked him into letting Jack escape. Suddenly, they hear the padlock, and Joy hurriedly rolls Jack up into the rug just as Nick enters, bearing antibiotics. However, Joy breaks down in tears, accusing Nick of indirectly causing Jack's sickness by turning off the power. She pleads with him to give Jack a proper burial in the woods, somewhere with trees. Nick agrees to Joy's request and picks up Jack in the rolled-up rug, just as planned. He loads the rug into the back of his pickup truck and drives off towards the woods to bury Jack. Inside the rug, Jack feels the truck slowing to a stop. Sensing the opportunity, he begins to unravel himself and successfully frees himself from the rug. As old Nick rolls through 2 stop signs and proceeds over railroad tracks, Jack decides to take action. He stands up and jumps out of the truck, determined to find a person for help. Nick notices Jack's escape in his mirror and curses Joy for tricking him, causing him to stop the car. At the same time, Jack starts running toward a real person with a dog, but Nick grabs Jack violently, trying to force him back into the vehicle. Terrified, Jack attempts to hand the note to the person nearby as he's dragged away, but the man misunderstands, mistaking Jack for a girl due to his long hair. Suspicious, the man warns Nick to leave the girl alone and threatens to call the police. Old Nick abandons Jack and speeds off in the truck, leaving Jack alone with the man. Time passes, and Jack is approached by a friendly police officer and her cranky partner. He is placed in the back of the car and asks questions. The male officer speculates that Jack may have escaped from a cult, but the female officer shows more patience and understanding toward Jack. Eventually, Jack shows her Joy's bad tooth that he keeps in his mouth, and he finally begins to open up and talk. She asks Jack for his mom's name, but he struggles to remember. When questioned about where he lives, Jack simply responds with a room. The officer inquires if the room has any windows, to which Jack replies in the negative. When asked about how they get light, Jack mentions the skylight. Recalling details, Jack remembers that the place is called the shed. He explains that he was supposed to jump out when the truck stopped, but it stopped twice and then went sideways instead. The female officer instructs her partner to issue a radio call to other officers, directing them to look for sheds with skylights in the backyards of houses 3 blocks from the railroad stop. She specifies that a red pickup truck should be parked in the driveway. As time passes, the police car arrives in front of the house where Jack was abducted, the same house seen when old Nick loaded the rug into his truck. The officers leave Jack alone in the car, and he finds himself unable to open the door as it's a police vehicle. Suddenly, Joy appears, running around the corner followed by the officers. She rushes towards the car with Jack inside, but neither of them can open or get out. Joy bangs on the glass in frustration. Later, Jack wakes up in a hospital room, which feels enormous compared to the confined space he's been in for so long. Large windows offer a view of a world he's been isolated from. Joy wakes up, and Jack confesses that he wet the bed and apologizes. However, Joy reassures him, disposing of his underwear and promising to get more. She tells him they have a lot of food, and when Jack asks if it's for their Sunday treat, she replies that they'll have lots of treats, not just on Sundays. Jack expresses a desire to take a bath, but Joy informs him that they have a shower stall instead. They shower together, playing and enjoying the experience. while Jack marvels at the view of the city from the hospital window. Overwhelmed by seeing more of the world than the room for the first time, he feels a mix of excitement and apprehension. Joy and Jack undergo various treatments and tests. The doctor advises Jack to wear a mask and sunscreen before going outside since he hasn't developed immunity to the environment, but reassures that he's still young enough to likely develop normally. Despite this, Jack also receives vaccinations for the first time to help him acclimate properly. It's mentioned that Joy will undergo surgery on her wrist, which was damaged by Nick after she attempted to harm him. Joy shares with Jack that his grandma and grandpa will be meeting them soon. Grandpa now lives several hours away, but he has flown in for the reunion. Bursting through the door, tired of waiting to be admitted, they embrace their long-lost kidnapped daughter. Jack and Joy are then taken to Joy's childhood home, where her mother now lives with her new husband. Despite the media camped outside the house, the family chooses to ignore them. Inside the house, Jack eagerly asks about the hammock that Joy always talked about, but she's unsure of its whereabouts, speculating that it might have been removed over the past 7 years. Jack learns that his grandma's new husband has a dog, but the dog is kept in the countryside. The house is filled with toys for Jack, gifts from all the people who care about him. Curious, Jack asks who these people are. When Jack's grandmother suggests cutting his hair, he whispers to Joy that his strength is in his hair, indicating a strong attachment to his long hair. Joy notices her room is exactly as she left it. She flips through her old yearbook and shows Jack an old picture of her from high school with members of her track team, where she ran anchor. She asks if he knows what happened to the other girls, to which Jack responds that he doesn't. At dinner, Jack is given ice cream and experiences his first brain freeze. Meanwhile, Joy's mom and stepdad try to make conversation, but Joy becomes violently angry with her own father. She demands that he acknowledge his grandson, but he can't because he is too uncomfortable. Eventually, Joy takes Jack upstairs. Joy and Jack have a hard time settling into life outside their captivity, struggling to adapt to their newfound freedom. Jack asks Joy when they are going to leave, but she tells him that they live there now. He remains wary of people and often hides in small spaces. Joy's stepdad's friendliness toward him helps Jack feel slightly more comfortable. The family's lawyer arrives and informs them about the upcoming trial, mentioning the need for money. He suggests doing a primetime interview as the easiest way to acquire funds. Shortly after, a broadcast journalist arrives at the house. During the interview, Joy is made up by the crew and given prompts in case she feels uncomfortable with any questions. She can simply request they move on. However, when the journalist asks about Joy's faith in God and whether she ever considered taking her own life during captivity, Joy is derailed and doesn't provide a response. The journalist then asks Joy what she will tell her son when he asks about his father one day. Joy responds that Nick was not her father, to which the journalist inquires if there were other men involved. Joy explains that there were no other men, emphasizing that she is Jack's only parent. However, the journalist disregards this response and insists that Nick is Jack's father biologically. The journalist continues with invasive questioning, asking why Joy didn't have her captor take Jack away when he was born, suggesting that Jack could have been dropped off at a hospital to live a normal life. Imposing further, the journalist implies that Joy kept Jack imprisoned out of a selfish desire to avoid being alone. The interview leaves Joy deeply upset, sinking into depression. She becomes aggressive with Jack, trying to force him to play with the toys given by sympathetic people. However, Jack isn't interested, so she resorts to forcing him to play with Legos. Joy's mother tries to defend Jack, but Joy explodes on her, expressing her frustration that her mother seems to have moved on with her life just fine in Joy's absence. Despite her mother's encouragement to be nice, Joy retorts that her mother's voice telling her to be nice is what led her into captivity in the first place. Later, Jack hears noises coming from the bathroom and discovers his mom unconscious on the floor after a suicide attempt. Joy is taken away, leaving Jack alone with just his grandma and her boyfriend. However, as time passes, Jack begins to acclimate more to the world and feels increasingly comfortable in their home. His grandma's husband even brings his dog home, which excites Jack, reminding him of his imaginary dog, Lucky. Eventually, Joy calls Jack from the hospital. Although he doesn't know how to use a telephone, they manage to have a short conversation. Jack then expresses to Grandma that he wants her to cut his hair, which has never been cut in his whole life. Grandma asks if he's sure, and he explains that his long hair has been his strength, but now he wants to send it to his mom so it can be her strength. Grandma, who used to cut Joy's hair, agrees and cuts off Jack's ponytail in a few snips, which he worries might hurt. However, she reassures him and tells him that she's wanted to cut his hair for a long time. Jack expresses his love to Grandma. As time goes by, a neighbor spies Jack through the window, and Jack goes into the backyard to play with him. Meanwhile, Joy is watching from inside. She greets Jack and tells him that when he sent his hair, it made her happy and gave her a reason to come home. Then they play Legos together. Jack asks Joy if they are ever going to return to the room. Taken aback, Joy clarifies that he means just for a visit. Joy and Jack then return to the shed, now with the front door blasted off. It looks completely different from his new perspective, so Jack wonders if it's been shrunk. Joy explains that all the furniture is gone because the police took it for evidence to prove that they were there. Jack notices the difference with the door open, and when Joy asks if she should shut it, he says no. Just like when he said hello to everything in the room, Jack now says goodbye to each item. He then tells Joy to say goodbye to room. Privately, Joy mouths "bye room." Joy and Jack walk away from the shed with police escorts in the distance, giving them the opportunity to say goodbye to their prison after years of captivity. With this, we conclude our today's recap. If you've been moved by their story, don't forget to hit the like button and leave a comment sharing your reflections. Subscribe to our channel to stay connected and be the first to know about our latest updates and content. Thank you for joining us on this unforgettable journey, and until next time, may their resilience and hope continue to guide us forward.